Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be working on this really unusual 1980s SD40-2 locomotive. I think it's an SD40-2. I can't entirely tell. I'm no expert on this stuff, but I think it is. I picked this thing up about a year ago, well, actually over a year ago at Larkspur Line train store in Merrickville. They were doing their Boxing Day to New Year's sale. I was there with a couple of my train buddies at the time, and we were going through boxes of old locomotives. And I found this thing, and I kind of broke one of my rules about buying kind of junked engines, which is that I bought one that's missing parts. But this shouldn't inhibit it running, and as a matter of fact, this engine actually does run to some extent, so that's not so bad. I didn't pay much for it, but yeah, when I saw this thing in there, I was kind of like, you know what, it's an 80s Bachmann, it's not a great engine, but you know, it's sort of interesting. It's got some kind of cool details, and it had this blinking light on top, which I was sort of curious about, so I was like, what the heck, I'll cough up whatever it was, 10 or less bucks to buy it, and yeah, we'll fix it up at some point, and hopefully get an okay runner out of it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to find a part for this, but I'm not terribly bothered by it. I mean, I'd be happier if it had this part, but you know, if you spend $10 on an engine, you don't want to be sinking too much money for parts into it. So if I stumble across the part, I'll buy it for this engine, but in all likelihood, I think I'll just leave it as is. But we can definitely improve it, because it doesn't run that great right now. I think it's been sitting in whatever box it was at the store for a long time, and probably has never had the oil changed. So yeah, we'll crack it open, see if we can fix it up, and hopefully this thing will be a little bit better by the end of the episode. I'm going to take it over to the track just so I can show you all exactly how it's performing right now. So we'll get this thing all set up on the track. It's not a great runner. These engines never really were the best out there. Bachmann was kind of at its worst for quality, I would say, during the 1980s, and a lot of these engines have not aged very well. They're kind of notorious for having nylon gears, which over time they split because they were pressure fit around metal parts. But you know what, if you pick them up cheap and you know, you don't mind compromising a little bit of quality just to have some fun engines to play around with, they could be alright. So I buy them, but I don't ever pay much for them. Anyway, if we give this one some power, it's not running fantastic. You can see it's definitely a bit sluggish. I'm giving it power, it's not even starting right now. There we go. So it's okay, but it could definitely be better. So we're going to take this thing back over to my workbench. We'll crack it open. It's only got a 3-pole motor in it, and it's only like 6-wheel drive, I believe. Yeah, it is 6-wheel drive, you can see. But we can definitely make it a little bit better. Alright, so we're now going to crack this locomotive open. There's some really weird things about it. First of all, it's got this little piece. I have a Bachmann Centennial from the 80s, and some of them actually had battery packs in them for sound. This one doesn't appear to have any room for a battery pack. There's just a weight here, but for some reason the little cover for the battery pack is still included. So I don't know if some of these models maybe had sound, but that's sort of strange. It also looks like the original owner did some stuff to compensate for it missing basically the truck cover. You can see that the coupler is actually connected to the truck cover, so since they lost that, they attached a coupler box, but to do so they put a really long screw through the back of the deck here and put a whole bunch of washers to hold it on. It's very unconventional, you would say. We have to remove this to take the cover off because it's connected to here, and we need to separate the chassis from the rest of it, so we're going to remove this. I don't know if I'm going to put it back on, honestly, because first of all, this engine just never really would be a great puller, and also this is just not a fantastic solution in my opinion. So I think I'll remove this. Again, if I manage to find a truck cover for it at some point, then this won't even be a problem because we can just go back to using, you know, what it was meant to use, which is a genuine coupler. So we're just going to unscrew that, and then we'll open the engine up, and then we'll hopefully be able to get to the drive. I've never worked on this style of Bachmann before. I've worked on a bunch of smaller Bachmann engines from the same era, but This is my first time working on one like this, so this is all somewhat new to me. So we'll just take this part out. And there we go. So that's good. Now, to open this engine up, I have looked it over. We've got some tabs on either side. I suspect if we lift these up, the whole thing will come apart. So we're just going to try to do that. And try to be careful not to break the plastic or anything. And we'll just repeat the same thing on the other side. Okay, we got that all out now. Front, hopefully will go the same way. And there we go, it's all coming apart. If this engine were fully intact, we would probably have to remove the couplers, but since the one... Actually, we wouldn't have to remove the back one because this is not connected, but for the front one, what we have to do is sort of just negotiate it through there. And we're on the inside, and we can see exactly what Bachmann did right here. I don't entirely understand how this works, but for the directional lighting, one of these pieces is a diode. So the power basically can flow one direction but not the other. So when you have the direction set one way, the power can flow through the diode to one of the lights but not the other, and that's how the directional lighting actually works. I don't know if this is it or not, though. These are all resistors right here, but I don't know if maybe this is... that looks like a diode. These look like capacitors to me, but I'm no expert, so I don't know entirely about that. And then I believe this little chip right here is probably responsible for the little LED, the little blinking LED on the top. Sort of funny that they went with an LED for this light, but incandescence for the others. Very unusual. And it looks like the original owner is once again up to some weird stuff. I don't know what the heck that is in there, but yeah, it's pretty wacko. It's like they found some like really small pieces of lead or something off of something, and they just chucked it in there. This has got to be one of the strangest engines I've ever worked on. You also see what Bachmann's done here too. They actually put you know, the same casing for a drive system on the unpowered side. It's so unusual. Anyway, enough of that. Let's try to disassemble it here. I believe to take it out, it's just as simple as pushing in these little tabs right here. So we'll just go ahead and do that. Yeah, they're a little stiff actually, but I'm sure with a little bit of poking we can get them out. Okay, got that out. It's not perfect, but yeah, whatever. Looks like we got a broken solder joint. Not the end of the world because there are multiple ones, but we'll try to solder that back on. To disassemble the drive, we'll just remove the wheels. And then pretty much just like almost all Bachmann pancake motor designs, we just got a screw on either side. I don't think I'm the first person to open this, because typically Bachmann puts some sort of like a red epoxy or something like that, maybe a resin over these screws. And I believe the reason they did that, there could be two reasons. The first one that comes to mind is since they put a warranty on these models, they didn't want people opening them up, and if that resin was gone, there would be proof that somebody, you know, messed around with it. The other thing could just be for vibration, so that the screws wouldn't kind of come out of place. I kind of lean more towards they just wanted proof for their warranty, but I don't know. Maybe somebody in the comments knows why they put that resin there. Lifelike never did, and I appreciate that they didn't, because it makes it a heck of a lot easier to open up their models. Maybe they did on some of them, but I don't recall ever seeing it on a lifelike model. So we open that up. There are springs back here. Be careful not to lose them. I do all the time, so I would know. And then we've got a couple brushes. They should pop out. And one of them did, so that's good. The other didn't. It's not always, oh, okay, both they're coming out, which is good. If they're stuck in there, that's not a great sign. But everything's moving properly, which is good. You want those parts to be able to move around. And then it should be as simple as just prying these two pieces apart. Sometimes these things get kind of stuck together, and it can be a bit tricky, but nope. What the heck? I've worked on a lot of model trains over the years, but I've never seen a gear like that before. That is so strange. Look at this. I have no idea why they would make a gear like this. This looks like it would be quite difficult to manufacture. I don't know if this is supposed to be better, maybe being near the motor for cooling, or some sort of a lubrication problem. This is very weird. This is another question. If anybody in the comments knows anything about why they made this gear this way, please let me know, because I do not have a clue. I've never seen this before in any Bachmann models I've ever opened up. Anyway, we're now going to pull this out. Here's the commutator. It's not looking awful. I've seen far worse, but it definitely needs to be cleaned, and the gaps don't look so great. I didn't notice much of an ozone smell when I was running it just for that short test, but I remember in the past when I was testing this, I think the first time at Larkspur, there was a pretty strong smell to it, and this is most likely the source, these little gaps which are all full of gunk. So we'll clean those out. You can see quite a bit is coming out. And we'll grab our fiberglass pencil and just clean all of this up. Oh, that's wonderful, isn't it? It's like it's brand new. So that's all good. I might just take a bit of alcohol and just clean the gears and whatnot. It's kind of greasy in here, and the gears themselves look sort of dirty. So I'll just do that quickly, and then we'll start reassembling the model. So you can see right here, we got all the old lubricants and grime and everything else that we didn't want to be in there out. So that's all good. It's not perfect, but it's definitely a lot better now, and it's all ready for us to reassemble. To reassemble this thing, we're going to be lubricating all the gears with some Label 102. I don't know if this is necessarily the best lubricant, but I don't want to put an oil in here that's too thick, so 102 is fine for this. These gearboxes, in my experience, don't really need any grease or anything like that. They just need, you know, a decent oil. So we'll just put those gears back in there. I did look over these gears a little bit. Some of them have a little bit of flashing on them, and you want to take something and cut this flashing off if you find it. These gear faces should be completely clean, because what I've seen, especially on older Tyco models, but on other manufacturers' models too, especially ones like these, which are not the highest quality, is that the people at the factory didn't take the flashing off properly, and this just causes the gears to, as they kind of rub up against each other, to get kind of stuck in certain places. So it's really not optimal. I think I misplaced a couple of these gears. I believe this one goes right here. You can see they've got slightly thicker teeth. Yeah, there you go. I got that right. It's just kind of hard to tell them apart size-wise. So you can see those are all generally turning pretty well. We will put oil on the tops of each of the gears, just to help them flow a little better. I mean, nylon is actually not a bad material from the sense that it's very low friction, but putting a bit of oil in there will not hurt it, so it's definitely something you want to do. I believe this gear just goes right over here. We'll feed it just a tiny bit of oil on the bearing and drop it in place, and you can see that's turning pretty nice, so that's good. And now we can put some oil here, and we'll put that really kind of psycho-looking gear back on. I'm still so weirded out by this thing. It's really interesting, but I've just never really seen anything like it. Actually, before we put that in, I'm going to put a tiny bit of oil. Literally, I'm not even squeezing the bottom, just putting whatever residue is on the top, because we're going to put the motor in first. And you really don't want to put any oil like barely any, just because you don't want oil to end up on the commutator, because what happens is the oil, if you put too much, it will flow through that bearing, it will come to the end, and once it gets on the motor shaft, the rotation of the motor will actually spit the oil out onto the commutator and it will start to burn. So I've seen that on countless old models. It's really not great. So anyway, yeah, I'm turning this manually with my hand, and you can see it's turning pretty well. So I think we were quite successful with that. So yeah, I don't really see any reason why we can't put this all back together. Before we do, I'm going to put a little bit of oil on this side. You can be a little bit more generous on this side of the motor because there's not any commutator to get oil on, so that's fine. And I put some oil there because this is going to be rubbing up against that gear. Maybe that's why they made that gear a bit different than the others, because they wanted to minimize the contact area. Again, I'm just throwing out guesses here for that, but maybe that was why. And it should all just kind of snap back together. Always check it too. You can see this is turning pretty smooth. It's not going to be like freewheeling. There are magnets and things like that in here, but just as long as it's like turning smooth, you've probably done it right. I just hope that I got the positioning of this gear correct. We'll put the wheels back in. I'm going to have a quick look at these. It looks like there might be a bit of hair wrapped around some of them. This is a really common problem. Yeah, always check the axles, because it's super common to find old pieces of hair and stuff. You know, some of these were run on carpets and things like that, so you can see a little on there. I'm just going to clean these off. Okay, I got all the axles all cleaned up. The model would be like this. I believe this one was right here on the back, so we'll put it where it was, which was right here. These metal contacts really are not looking that great. We're going to try to straighten them out a little, and I find usually the best way to do this is just to use something kind of flat, like a flathead screwdriver, and just kind of try to even out all the kind of uneven parts of the metal, and always make sure you pull them out just a tiny bit, because you want there to be a decent amount of pressure on the wheels. You don't want it to be anything too extreme, but if there's not enough pressure on the wheels, you're not going to have very good electrical connections. So that's something you always want to keep in mind. Anyway, we're going to put the gears on. I'll find out if I got the positioning of that larger gear correct. Let's see here. I don't know. Well, it seems fine, I guess. Yep, all seems good. And then we just lubricate each of the bearings. Oops, that's a little too much oil. And you can put some on the teeth too if you want all this just to flow together a little better. It's not great this is not covered up, because it is probably going to end up sucking in some pieces of cap for whatever other things are happen to be sitting on the layout over the years, but it will at least help all this turn a little bit better, and with those contacts pushed in properly, will definitely make a better electrical connection. We can also solder this back on too, which will make it even greater. And then we'll just put these parts of the motor back in. It's kind of odd that those come out sometimes, but not much you can do about it. It's not like it's really a big deal that they come out either. Okay. So there are our brushes. They don't look too dirty or anything, so we'll just pop them in. And we'll follow that up with a spring. I think this is how it was wired, but you have to be careful working on Bachmann engines, because you can't actually wire these the wrong way, because if the wheels are wired the opposite way, you'll flip the wires and you'll have power kind of crisscrossing, and then you'll get a short circuit. So this could be wrong. I don't know. No, actually I can tell. I think we've got it right. As you can see, the wires right here, and you can see that the red one right here is on the right side, so red on the right. Now, it's not this way, but we're going to flip this whole thing around, so when we flip it, the red will be on the right. Hopefully I have not messed that up. It wouldn't be the first time. Okay, we got that one in, and on the other side. So, on paper, this thing should work. I find, you know, it's always a little bit different when you actually have the whole thing back together. Sometimes things go wrong, so you never know. But hopefully we've done it all right, and when we put this whole thing back together and we set it up on the track, we'll have a fine working model. That would be nice, wouldn't it? I put even more weights there. This is such a strange engine. Oh. All right, excellent. Let's take this thing over to the track and see if it runs. All right, moment of truth here. It's all set up, and if we give it some power, hey, we got a runner. It's not too bad. Seems to be running slightly better than it was before, in my opinion. It's a little bit faster with the same amount of power. It's definitely running a little bit more consistently too, so that's all good. I don't want to give this thing too much power. It's probably not designed to run on a whole lot. So let's crank it down a little bit. But yeah, that's actually running quite nicely for an older Bachmann. Okay, why don't we see what kind of low speed we have out of this thing. Wouldn't expect anything too remarkable out of the 3-pole, but you never know. Sometimes these things are not too bad. I think it actually just conked out there. But yeah, that's decent for the type of model we're working with. So yeah, overall I'm very happy with how this thing turned out. It's actually running way better than I would have expected for an engine of its kind. But yeah, in any case, I hope you all enjoyed. I'm happy with how it turned out. And with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching.